The story begins with a chilling and fascinating concept. A couple who accidentally finds themselves trapped in a future where Earth has become completely empty. No humans, no noise, no civilization, just silence everywhere. As if humanity suddenly vanished overnight. We are introduced to Riley and Jane, a couple living in the USA, who are heading toward an unknown destination to enjoy a peaceful vacation. Riley belongs to a wealthy family and is never worried about money in his life, while Jane constantly lives with fear and insecurity. She often wonders what would happen if Riley ever lost his wealth or if his family abandoned him. Despite all her doubts, Riley truly loves Jane and spends a huge amount of money on this trip because, for him, happiness simply means creating unforgettable memories with the person he loves. After a long journey, the couple finally reaches a remote tourist destination surrounded by breathtaking mountains, natural landscapes, and peaceful scenery. They check into a hotel and step out to explore the area and grab something to eat. Here, we also see a clear difference in their personalities. Jane strongly believes in spirituality, influenced by her father, who serves as a priest at a small church. On the other hand, Riley completely dismisses faith and spirituality, believing they are nothing more than illusions created to control people. One unusual thing Riley always carries with him is an old tape recorder that once belonged to his father. In today's modern world filled with advanced technology, the device looks completely outdated. Jane often playfully mocks him for still using such an old gadget, but Riley never feels embarrassed. For him, the recorder isn't just technology. It's a precious memory of his father, something that keeps their emotional bond alive even after all these years. After freshening up, the couple joins a small tourist group to explore the area. The place is filled with stunning landscapes, tall mountains, and natural hot water fountains that make the trip even more exciting. After spending hours traveling and exploring, both of them return to their hotel room completely exhausted. Jane quickly falls asleep on the bed, while Riley quietly lies down on the other side so he doesn't disturb her rest. During the night, strange lights begin appearing outside. Because of this unusual brightness, Jane's sleep gets disturbed, and she walks toward the window to see what's happening. As soon as Jane looks at the sky, she notices a bright glowing light. At first, she assumes it's simply the northern lights, which are common in such regions. However, the lights suddenly begin growing stronger and start moving downward in an unnatural way. Confused and half asleep, Jane convinces herself that she must be dreaming because aurora lights never behave like this. Eventually, she goes back to bed and falls asleep again. The next morning, Riley wakes up and comes to wake Jane. Neither of them notices anything unusual at first, except for one shocking detail. Time seems normal, but the calendar now shows the year 2028, even though they originally belonged to the year 2000. Completely unaware of what has truly happened, the couple freshens up and heads toward the hotel cafeteria for breakfast, since meals were supposed to be complimentary. But when they arrive, the entire place is empty. No staff members, no guests, and no prepared food, just complete silence. Even after calling out loudly, no one responds. Feeling uneasy yet hungry, they decide to step outside and search for another cafe. However, the moment they walk into the city, they are stunned. The streets are completely deserted. Not a single human being is visible, and the once lively city has turned silent and lifeless. The noise, movement, and energy of civilization have completely vanished. Shocked and confused, Riley and Jane try to rationalize the situation, wondering if perhaps a festival or large event has taken everyone away from the city. But deep down, they realize something is terribly wrong. Because if such an event were happening, they would have known about it. It slowly becomes clear that something far more mysterious has occurred, and now they must uncover the terrifying truth behind why the entire world seems abandoned. Both of them continue wandering through the empty streets of the city, desperately hoping to find at least one person or a cafe where they could get something to eat. Their mobile phones were still working, but no connection could be established with anyone. Every message they sent remained unseen. Slowly, fear begins to take over their minds. When they enter another cafe, they notice several television screens installed inside. Riley quickly turns on the news channels, hoping to understand what is happening around the world. However, instead of news broadcasts, random programs are playing everywhere. This terrifies them even more, because despite shouting and searching everywhere, not a single human being appears. As they step out of the cafe, countless disturbing thoughts begin running through Riley's mind. He wonders that if a deadly virus or plague had spread across the world, then where were all the dead bodies? And if aliens had attacked humanity, there should at least be some evidence, spacecrafts or destruction. But nothing like that exists. There are no signs of struggle, no chaos, and no explanation. Completely confused, the couple rushes back to their hotel. Riley even checks the world map and available systems, but everything appears strangely normal. Except for one terrifying fact: humans are completely gone. Public places, tourist spots, and streets all stand abandoned without a single trace of life. Now they slowly begin realizing that something unimaginable has happened, something that caused every human being to disappear. Somehow, only the two of them seem to be left behind in this hotel. Jane tries contacting her family members repeatedly, but no replies ever come. The internet and technology still function perfectly, yet the people who operate them have vanished. This realization deeply frightens Riley. In panic, he takes Jane with him and steals an abandoned car parked nearby, driving out of the city as fast as possible. They start believing that perhaps something is wrong with this particular city, but the reality waiting for them is far darker. They drive toward the church where they had earlier met a priest, hoping to find someone there. But even the church is completely empty. Silence surrounds the entire place, confirming their worst fear. The whole island has become deserted. Overwhelmed by helplessness, both of them break down and cry while holding each other. Riley tries to comfort Jane, assuring her that everything will be all right and that this must be some unknown phenomenon they simply don't understand yet. He promises they will eventually find a way out. Jane becomes emotionally and mentally exhausted, so Riley brings her back to the hotel where she falls asleep for several hours, unable to process the shock. Living among millions of people and suddenly finding the entire world empty is enough to break anyone mentally. When she wakes up, Jane believes that perhaps God is angry with humanity and has punished them by taking everyone away. Riley, who never believed in spirituality, disagrees and insists there must be a scientific explanation, maybe an unknown virus or global disaster that wiped everyone out. Refusing to lose hope, Riley encourages Jane to stay strong. He explains that if they give up mentally or physically, they will not survive. Determined to adapt, they decide to move forward instead of waiting helplessly. Soon, they choose an empty house to live in since no one else remains. The entire island now feels like it belongs only to them. They can go anywhere and use anything without restriction. After selecting their own rooms, both of them begin adjusting to this strange new reality. Riley cooks food for Jane and tries to make her feel comfortable, while Jane slowly starts accepting their situation. They visit supermarkets and freely collect food and supplies without needing to pay, since there is no one left to stop them. For the first time since the disaster, they attempt to live normally. But deep inside, both know that the mystery behind humanity's disappearance still remains unsolved, and the truth waiting ahead may be far more terrifying than they can imagine. Riley had also noticed something very important. All the electrical systems on the island were powered by geothermal energy. This meant that electricity would continue running for many years, and they wouldn't have to worry about power shortages anytime soon. Slowly, it began to feel as if both of them were trying to forget everything that had happened and simply focus on spending time together. They visited nightclubs, sang songs, cooked food, and enjoyed themselves freely. Since they were the only two people left on the island, life almost started feeling peaceful and carefree. However, deep down, neither of them knew how long this strange situation could last. For the first few days, everything went surprisingly well. But soon, loneliness started affecting Jane deeply. She realized she could not live like this forever, completely cut off from humanity. Once again, both of them slipped into depression, constantly wondering whether there was any way to bring the missing people back. Even though they had all the resources needed for survival, emotional emptiness continued to grow. Trying not to overthink, Riley and Jane decided to explore the island more thoroughly. During their journey, Riley used the old camera given to him by his father to take pictures of Jane. That camera meant a lot to him because it carried memories of his father, and he carefully preserved everything connected to him. Riley began recording every precious moment they spent together, wanting to hold on to these memories forever. While exploring, they discovered a natural hot water fountain. Excited by the discovery, both of them relaxed there, enjoying the warm water and playing around like carefree travelers. After spending hours exploring forests and nature, exhaustion took over, and they eventually fell asleep right there on the grass. Later, while returning home, they stopped at a store to collect groceries. Jane picked up fruits and supplies, but boredom had started affecting her mentally. To pass time, she began punching cans, something she enjoyed since boxing had always been her hobby. Meanwhile, Riley was playing around with a shopping cart, riding it across the store for fun. Suddenly, the cart flipped over, and Riley fell badly, injuring his hand. Hearing his scream, Jane rushed toward him and helped treat the wound. Thankfully, the injury was minor, but the incident frightened Jane. She realized that if something serious ever happened, there were no doctors or hospitals left to help them. That night, to cheer her up, Riley arranged a romantic dinner date. Jane dressed beautifully, and the two sat together at a candlelit table while Riley served wine. Despite the effort, sadness was still visible on Jane's face. She gently scolded Riley, telling him he needed to take better care of himself. She feared that if something ever happened to her and Riley was left alone, he wouldn't know how to survive. Riley promised her that as long as she was with him, he would never act carelessly again. However, the emotional weight of isolation was beginning to damage their relationship. Living alone on an abandoned island felt like a cruel curse, and the pressure slowly created distance between them. Later, Jane returned to her room and lay quietly on the bed. She told Riley about a special book her father had lovingly given her. Instead of properly reading it, she had filled it with personal notes about her daily life. One of her biggest regrets was never completing that book, and now it wasn't even with her anymore. Riley understood what she was feeling, but he reminded her that, for now, they should focus on the reason they came here, to spend time together and enjoy life. He kept trying to take her outside and explore new places, hoping it would ease her sadness. Yet a terrifying question remained in both their minds. What would happen when resources eventually ran out? Gradually, the canned foods stored in supermarkets began reaching expiration dates. Even though only 2 people were consuming them, food spoilage was unavoidable. Riley started eating the canned food quickly before it expired, despite Jane trying to stop him. At the same time, Jane worried that even geothermal energy might someday fail. Without electricity, they wouldn't be able to cook or preserve food. Realizing the seriousness of their situation, Riley suggested they start farming and hunting animals for survival, just like ancient tribes living in forests. At first, Jane found the idea almost unbelievable. After all, they had lived modern, comfortable lives. But now, survival itself was becoming their biggest challenge, and the reality of their new world was slowly forcing them to change. Riley and Jane both belonged to a modern city lifestyle, and survival tasks like farming or hunting were things they had never imagined doing in their lives. But situations have the power to bring even the strongest people down to reality. Neither of them had any idea what kind of hardships awaited them ahead, especially when they were completely alone in a world without humanity. As days passed, Jane continued going out for evening walks, and often found herself returning to the same church again and again. Since she strongly believed in spirituality and God, this place became her only emotional support after they got trapped there. Whenever she arrived at the church grounds, she would stand near a statue placed there and begin talking to it. Even though the statue was lifeless, Jane treated it like a friend, sharing her thoughts and emotions as if it could respond to her loneliness. Back at home, Riley constantly tried to distract Jane so she wouldn't feel trapped in a hopeless situation. He took her to different unexplored locations across the island, hoping adventure would lift her mood. But nothing seemed to work anymore. Jane had lost interest in everything. All she wanted was to escape from this empty world because living in complete isolation was slowly breaking her mentally. While traveling further, they eventually reached a dark area where a crashed airplane lay abandoned. The wreckage was scattered everywhere. Riley viewed the site from an artistic perspective and began taking photographs, fascinated by how visually striking it looked. But Jane saw it very differently. To her, the crash represented death and tragedy. She imagined how many lives must have been lost there and believed the place carried only pain and bloodshed. Her constant negativity began affecting Riley as well, ruining the moment despite his efforts to stay positive. Frustrated and overwhelmed, Jane suddenly lost control, got into the car, and drove away without even allowing Riley to sit inside. Riley decided not to chase her immediately. As night fell, he stayed near the plane wreckage and ended up sleeping there alone. The next morning, instead of returning home, Riley continued exploring other parts of the island, capturing photographs of unique locations. He believed his father's old camera was extremely valuable because it didn't rely on electricity. When power eventually disappeared from the world, this camera would still allow him to preserve memories of their existence. After using up all the camera film, Riley entered an electronics store searching for useful equipment. At this point, he began seriously thinking about long-term survival. If humanity had truly vanished, surviving for years would require careful planning. Even though resources and electricity were still available, he understood that one day everything would stop working. He realized that survival experts always recommend gathering knowledge first. Books related to farming, medicine, and survival techniques would become more valuable than technology because the internet would eventually disappear. Natural resources would be the only way to stay alive. Energy would need to be generated through solar panels, wind turbines, or hydro systems to avoid dependence on failing infrastructure. Determined to prepare, he collected hardware equipment to build his own hydro-powered energy system. After gathering supplies, he entered an elevator, but for a brief moment, the door failed to open, causing him to panic. He realized that if electricity had shut down at that moment, he could have been trapped there forever. After returning home, Riley immediately began assembling the equipment to create an independent power system. By now, he fully understood one harsh truth. The comforts they were still enjoying would not last forever, and if they wanted to survive, preparation had to begin right now. Riley clearly understood that proper planning was the only way they could survive in this abandoned world. Without preparation, their future was uncertain. On the other hand, Jane's mindset was completely different. She slowly began living in her own emotional world, doing whatever gave her temporary comfort. Sometimes she would visit empty theaters and watch different movie scenes alone, while other times she spent hours at abandoned farms riding horses. Yet no matter where she went, she eventually returned to Riley, because he was now the only human left in her world. Meanwhile, Riley continued exploring mountainous areas, constantly taking photographs. When Jane finally reached him there, instead of getting angry again, Jane accepted the situation and let go of her frustration. The two sat together peacefully, and Riley reassured her that he would eventually find a way out of this nightmare. Despite everything, his love for Jane remained unchanged. After leaving the mountains, they returned to the city and searched through multiple stores for useful supplies. Riley entered an abandoned photography shop and collected several camera films, while Jane gathered items she thought might help them later. Since there was no one left in the city, Riley suggested they finally go camping, something they had originally planned during their vacation. Driving out of the city, they reached a nearby forest and decided to stay there. As they moved deeper into the forest, they discovered an underground chamber. Its doors were open, and belongings were scattered everywhere, indicating that someone had lived there before suddenly disappearing. While settling in, they stepped outside and unexpectedly saw an old man approaching them. His name was Neil. The sight of other humans shocked him so deeply that he nearly suffered a heart attack, as it had been years since he had seen another person. Neil was extremely weak, and Riley immediately helped him inside, sharing their food and supplies. Jane felt relieved for the first time because she had finally met another living human, though fear still lingered inside her. Neil explained that mysterious phenomena had suddenly caused humanity to vanish. His family had initially survived with him, but years later, tragedy struck. When he returned home after a long absence, he discovered that desperation and loneliness had changed everything. With resources running out, one by one, his family members eventually died. Neil tried to comfort Jane, telling her that whatever happened was part of God's will and that someday humanity might return. Until then, they needed courage and faith to survive. His words gave both Riley and Jane a sense of hope, and they spent the day together in the chamber. However, the next morning brought heartbreaking news. Riley informed Jane that Neil had passed away during the night. His weakened condition had finally taken his life. Riley and Jane buried him nearby, in the same place where Neil had buried his own family members. Yet one mystery remained unresolved. Neil's relatives had been young and healthy, so how had they died before him? That secret was buried along with Neil forever. After this loss, Jane's behavior became increasingly aggressive and unstable. She had finally found another survivor, only to lose him again. Riley brought her back to the city, hoping they could rebuild some sense of normal life. But Jane was now consumed by frustration. She became convinced that more survivors must still exist somewhere. She began searching every house in the city, marking empty homes with a cross symbol whenever she found no one inside. Riley tried to reason with her, explaining that searching endlessly was pointless if no one was left. Instead, they should focus on preparing for the future. But Jane refused to listen and continued her desperate search for other humans. At the same time, Riley successfully completed building a small wind turbine, allowing them to generate limited electricity independently. Despite ongoing arguments between them, the two eventually traveled toward the seashore. Standing beside the ocean, Riley continued taking photographs while explaining something meaningful to Jane. Everything around them might have ended, but nature remained unchanged. The flowing water had existed long before them and would continue long after. For a brief moment, both of them silently watched the waves together, sharing a peaceful connection as they tried to find meaning and hope in a world that no longer belonged to humanity. In this painful situation, Riley and Jane realize that they now have only each other for support, and they share an emotional kiss, knowing they must stay strong together to survive. Later, while Jane is preparing something, a notification sound suddenly comes from her laptop. For a moment, she feels hopeful, thinking that maybe someone has finally contacted them or rescue is on the way. But her hope instantly shatters when she discovers that the message was actually sent by Riley, who had simply shared one of her beautiful photographs. This realization completely breaks Jane, as her last remaining hope fades away. After sleeping for several hours, Riley wakes up and notices an envelope lying nearby. When he opens it, he finds a photograph of Jane inside. However, something feels strange. It was taken at the rocky cliff area he often visited, yet Riley clearly remembers that he had never taken Jane's picture there. Confused and worried, he calls out for Jane throughout the house, but she is nowhere to be found. Panic takes over, and Riley immediately rushes toward the rocky area in his car. Meanwhile, the turbine system Riley had built at home finally starts working, supplying water without electricity. But Riley's attention is fixed only on finding Jane. As soon as he reaches the cliffside, he searches desperately, and then freezes in shock. Jane's lifeless body is floating in the water. Without thinking, Riley jumps in to save her, but it is already too late. Overwhelmed by loneliness and emotional exhaustion, Jane had taken the heartbreaking decision to end her life. Riley pulls her out of the water, refusing to accept reality, but Jane is gone forever. Completely shattered, he even attempts to drown himself, unable to live without her. However, as his breath begins to fail, survival instinct forces him back to the surface. His mental state collapses entirely. Now, after losing Jane, Riley realizes that he may truly be the last human left on Earth. He places Jane's body in the car and drives away, crying uncontrollably. In his grief, he lets go of the steering wheel, hoping an accident will end his life too. But suddenly, he remembers his father's words, that he must survive no matter what. Gathering the last bit of strength within him, Riley grabs the steering wheel again and continues driving forward. And with this emotional moment, the story finally comes to an end, leaving behind a haunting question about loneliness, survival, and the true value of human connection. And with that emotional and heartbreaking moment, this incredible story finally comes to an end. A world without humans, endless silence, and one man left alone with nothing but memories. Honestly, this movie makes us think, is survival really possible without the people we love? Now, I really want to know your experience after watching this story. Did the ending shock you? Did you feel bad for Riley? Or do you think things could have ended differently? Make sure to share your thoughts in the comments section, because I read every single comment. If you enjoyed this explanation even a little, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more mind-blowing movie stories like this. Let's set a target of 1,000 likes on this video, and I'll bring another amazing movie explanation very soon. Thanks for watching till the end. See you in the next thrilling story.